Today on the Sachairi and Peaches Show, it's a brand new podcast. We'll let you get to know ourselves and how this show's going to go.
We'll also predict, or try to predict anyway, who will win Best Animated Feature at the Oscars this coming Sunday.
Plus, a pilot for a rather familiar series is unearthed, and if you love Panic at the Disco, let them go.
It's all coming up on today's edition of the Sachairi and Peaches Show, March 7th, 2023.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sachairi and Peaches Show. My name's Adrian Emma.
And I'm Emma Settles.
And how are you doing today?
Things are, things have been interesting in Emma Land, or in Peaches Canyon, as you and I would like to call it, to say the least. But hey, I'm hanging in there. Things are great. We're starting our new show. So I couldn't be more excited. How about yourself?
Yeah, that's right. I'm really excited about this brand new show myself too. Listen, as Emma said, this is a brand new show. This is, of course, the Sachairi and Peaches Show, and we're going to take a little bit of time to kind of really introduce ourselves and also introduce you to how we're going to go about this podcast. So, Emma, if you like, I'd like for you to go first.
Okay, of course. So, yeah, as I said before, I'm Emma Settles, and I am an autistic artist and animator from the DMV area, also known as the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, for those of you who are not in the loop. But I am currently recording this and just in general attending school at the University of the Arts in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. And I am studying 2D animation and screenwriting there. I've completed my screenwriting program, thankfully, because doing screenwriting while doing a senior film might have been not fantastic, but I digress with that. Yeah. Thankfully, I got my 90-page script done when I was a junior, so I don't have to worry about that now. But anyway, once again, I digress. I'm a 2D animator, but I think personally my level of passion and interest kind of lies within the stop motion animated side of the animation industry. And yeah, I when I was like on Tumblr and stuff, I went by the stop motion wolf. I'm still the self-proclaimed stop motion wolf. I'm a big Tim Burton fan. I'm a big Laika fan. And whenever there's a new stop motion animated film, period, I get very excited. But yeah, besides doing art and stuff in my free time, I'm pretty much almost always drawing or animating, mostly illustrating and drawing. But yeah, in my free time, if I'm not, working on art, then I am either fursuiting or making fursuits, or I am playing Don't Starve Together, which is my current level, obsession, and I will not shut up about it. If you get me started, I will not stop. So we'll probably talk about it because there's cartoons and stuff that the game releases, especially since there is a new update coming soon. So I'm very thrilled about that. But that will be an entirely different story for an entirely different time.
Yes, so, I was going to say that.
Yeah, but now that you know me, let's meet our main host, Adrian.
Yes, of course. So my name is, of course, Adrian Mata. I'm an autistic artist born in the Philippines. My parents are still trying to confirm if I was born in Las Piñas or Pamplona. They're still trying to work that out. But anyway, I currently live in Orlando, Florida, and in about a week's time, I will be starting a new position with Universal Orlando as part of their food and beverage department. So if you happen to see me over there at the parks, just say hi, and we'll try and get you on your way with the rest of your day. So while I'm primarily a hobbyist in terms of illustration and graphic design, I'm also passionate about anything to do with animation. Well, as long as I try to stay away from the Disney side of it most of the time. So while I'm not doing this podcast or working in general, either I'm going to be drawing something. Right now, I've got a Sachairi and Sakura drawing in progress. I've already completed another Octonauts drawing. Um, either that, or either I'm watching the original Iron Chef series from Japan, some old or recent NASCAR IndyCar races, or just playing Planet Zoo. Whatever I can do just to keep myself busy. That's all I can say.
All right, so let's get to know a little bit more about the show in general. So, as you can see with the tagline here, we are pretty much covering animation, autism, and literally anything else. I feel like most weeks we'll be talking about what's going on currently in the modern animation industry, as well as picking apart any pretty notable feature films or television series or shorts or whatever else.
And we're also going to get into into how we live our daily autistic lives as well.
Of course. And, you know, with considering the everything else part, there's literally nothing that's going to be off the table here. I mean, most likely it's going to be something related either to animation that maybe is not like a super big story, or we don't have a whole bunch to say about due to the fact that there's not a lot of resources, or it's just something that we're personally interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But anything relating to pop culture or whatever, really, we feel like needs to be said. So literally nothing is off limits. If you don't get the structure right now, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Hopefully this will become second nature to you as well as to us as soon as we continue to keep recording our sessions. But yeah, that's how the show is going to work.
Yes. Yeah. And while today we've got ourselves a nice, good show here, we're going to be predicting who will be winning Best Animated Feature at the Oscars this coming weekend.
This topic I feel like has a lot to unpack, specifically with the history of the category and how the Oscars have treated animation and how they kind of go back and forth between treating it as a legitimate art form and of, a part of the Academy, as opposed to like kind of giving the award to whoever just grosses the highest, which is usually a Disney film.
Yeah, clearly they are the establishment.
Yeah, definitely. So that being said, there's a lot to unpack with this, especially considering all of the nominees this year. But hopefully, it's a pretty tight race from what I can tell, though. I mean, looking at the nominees this year, currently, it's in some ways, I don't really feel like this year that I have a super dead set, like, okay, this is the film that's going to take home Best Picture, because of the fact that from what I've learned and from what I've seen with some of these films, they all are good films and they all work well and they all have a lot of really good critical acclaim. So that being said, it's kind of like, I feel like it's good that this year I'm super unsure about who is going to take the Oscar, because it might not be Disney this year.
Yeah, it's kind of really a toss-up at this point.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's funny. In some ways, I feel super unqualified to talk about the films that are being nominated for Best Animated Feature this year, considering the fact that being an animation student, you'd think I would, spend a lot of my free time watching a lot of animated movies, especially as someone who kind of wants to get into like visual development for the feature film, specifically for animated features. The funny and sad about that is that when you're currently making films of your own, especially if you're doing it for school, then you don't really have a lot of time to watch and appreciate the films that have already been put out there. I mean, it's funny. It's like I remember from my junior year of college, so literally last year, one of my screenwriting professors always opened the class with like, okay, who's seen any, films, TV shows, whatever, that have particularly good or bad writing in them? And none of the animators, none of the filmmakers in general, I mean, this is kind of a universal school of film at least at my university, I found it experience. But usually there would be dead silence in that room, and one of us was brave enough and piped up and was like, hi, professor, since we're making our own film, we really don't have time to watch films. So, long story short, I've only seen one of the movies that is currently being nominated for an Oscar. And no, unfortunately, even though I just gave you the speech about how much I love stop motion animation, it is not Pinocchio. I'm ashamed to admit. But, I mean, it's Puss in Boots.
Yeah,
I've seen
obviously.
Puss in Boots
Yeah.
is kick-ass.
Yes.
It's so good. I mean, once again, ashamed it's not Pinocchio, but it's like the second best, if not, the best, in general. It's a good movie. It's a really good movie. I recommend it.
I agree. And I did see it right around New Year's while I was working at Universal during their holiday season the first time around, and I did see it in my local movie theater. And what I can remember, it was just a really good movie. The animation style, the story, how it kind of really helped to deconstruct the character of Puss in Boots. It was a great film, and I'm sure we're going to get to discuss all of that in just a moment. So speaking of which, we're going to go ahead and take a little break here. When we come back in just a moment, we're going to be discussing the nominees and who will be winning, who might win this year's Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards. Stay tuned. We're back with the Sachairi and Peaches Show. Alongside Emma Settles, I'm Adrian Mata. And now it's time for us to kind of really get into the meat of today's program, and that is predicting who's going to be winning Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards this year.
So this year, we've got 5 pretty stellar nominees, those being Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, say that 5 times really fast,
Mm-hmm.
The Sea Beast, and of course Turning Red. That being said, I feel like not to knock or badmouth Marcel the Shell or the Sea Beast. However, I think from what I'm seeing in the animation circle and within people who are really passionate about animation, I feel like the race is kind of neck and neck, or neck and neck, if you consider if you consider the fact there's 3 films here, between Puss in Boots, Pinocchio, and Turning Red.
Yes.
That's where the lines are starting to get a bit blurry, and this is where I personally feel like I can't really completely predict who exactly is going to take home the trophy that night, considering the fact that all 3 of these films have such strong critical acclaim that it's almost completely, I can't really put my finger on who exactly is going to win. And I sort of touched base on this before, but normally whenever the Best Animated Feature award is presented, I'm usually pretty much leaning towards, at the very least, as I got older and started recognizing these patterns with watching these award shows, or reading up about them.
Mm-hmm.
As it's been a while since I've actually sat down and watched an actual Oscars. Thank God I missed last year's. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I digress anyway. But yeah, normally I would, once I started picking up on these patterns, I started really realizing that these awards typically go to whoever makes the most money in the box office.
In that case, that would be Disney, and they're kind of really the establishment of this category.
Of course, yeah. From what I can tell, and from what I've been told in history of animation books and classes that I've attended and I've read, the category has only been around for so long anyway. I don't really want to completely put a number to it, but since the category's creation, Disney has mostly been dominating, taking home the Academy Awards, specifically the Oscars. But I mean, from what you can tell too, with other award shows such as like the Golden Globes and BAFTA and a whole bunch of other stuff even outside of the Oscars themselves, you can normally figure out that whatever film, what be it a live action film or an animated film, wins the Golden Globe in that category, they're also most likely Oscar.
Yeah, and this year it was Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio that took home not only the Golden Globe but also the BAFTA for Best Animated Film.
So that being said, I think if you're recognizing these levels of patterns, the stop motion appreciator in me is going very giddy because of the fact that they've already taken home these first two awards. So given the level, given the pattern of whatever wins the Golden Globe wins the Oscar, I think things are starting to fare quite well for Del Toro, and specifically, for Pinocchio, which like I said, I'm personally very thrilled about, especially since the last time we had a stop motion victory in a category like this was, I think, like 2005, which was Aardman's Curse of the Were-Rabbit. And that year was also a pretty nominal year, considering the fact that A, they only had 3 films nominated, and B, 2 of them were stop motion animated. The other contender being my personal favorite animated film, probably ever, Corpse Bride. So, and the other contender was Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah,
so it's
of course.
kind of like, so it was kind of like, if I was this age during 2005, I would be the kind of person who'd be like, sitting and watching this thing, like, I don't care who wins. Like, all these movies are fantastic. Like, go everybody. Like, I'm rooting for you all, and I won't be disappointed with the result either way. But that was also 2005. So that, and no Disney film directly, because, I mean, unfortunately, Disney and Ghibli Ghibli, unfortunately, is sort of the Disney property anyway, especially since they've supervised a majority of the dubs and the US releases of Ghibli films.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't count that as a victory for Disney. If anything, I'd count that as a victory for Ghibli if they won. So, that being said, 2005, great year to be alive for the animation Oscars. Too bad I was 4. And was also terrified of pretty much a majority of what was being nominated. I was such a scary cat back then. But yeah, I digress. Considering the fact that that stop motion hasn't had a victory since 2005, if Pinocchio takes home the Oscar, this would be a massive victory for that side of the animation industry.
Mm-hmm. We were very close with Kubo and the Two Strings in 2016. They won I know that film won the BAFTA for Best Animated Film that year.
Yeah, and that 2016 was another pretty close race from what I remember. I mean, I remember being like really, really excited, waiting for award season to start, considering the fact that I was probably one of Kubo's biggest supporters, especially with award shows. I remember distinctly, sitting in front of the TV, be like, "Come on, Kubo, you can pull this off. You can do it, like you can do it." little stop motion studio that could, but at the same time, 2016, I feel like was also sort of my recognition and my coming of age, so to speak, of realizing that Disney pretty much owns that award, no matter what the circumstances. That's where things get a little strange, because of the fact that even though Disney constantly takes home this award, Pinocchio is still outshining in most circumstances, turning red in award show categories. So I think it ultimately just comes down to the Academy's taste and whatever that is this year.
But if you do look at the pattern here, I know you said it. Obviously, Disney has owned the category like almost every year that this award has been given out. So more than likely, if we're looking at the pattern from the past several years, last year was Encanto, 2 years ago was Soul. We might as well be seeing Turning Red win the award this year.
Yeah, and that's incredibly true. I mean, I don't want to completely say that yes, this is exactly what's going to happen, considering the fact that we have so many strong contenders here. But yeah, if you really think about it, the Oscars very well could be the end of Pinocchio's victory streak, which is highly unfortunate, but given the past, it could happen. At the same time, though, I would like to bring up, finally, of course, the movie that we've unfortunately been neglecting in this conversation, which I don't know why that is, because it's fantastic, and it's also the only film out of the 5 I've seen, and that you've seen.
Yes, that would be Puss in Boots.
Exactly. Who would have thought that a sequel would have become such a legendary film, and if not much better and a big improvement, but have such a level of a fan base and people who have walked out of the movie theater with that same level of wow, I saw this film and it was fantastic. Yeah, I don't want to diminish its place in the Oscars race as well, considering the fact that it's utterly spectacular.
I mean, you got these Spider-Verse influenced animation. You got some well improved character designs from the first film and from the Shrek franchise in general. And also, you kind of have to take a look at what themes that the story devolved into, like anxiety and one's own mortality. Especially when you look at that panic attack scene that during the film.
Yeah, that scene in particular it was so well done. Overall, I don't think enough can really be said about it, because personally, I've never really seen panic attacks, anxiety, just genuine fear in general really be portrayed in animation especially, but just in film in general quite as well as that specific scene did. I mean, I'm at a loss for words right now trying to describe it completely, especially for the audience, who's listening in who might have not seen the film. But overall, it's such, at least from my own perspective as someone who does experience, panic attacks, intense anxiety, all that jazz.
Go on, Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
We'll do it live. We'll do it live. Screw it. We'll do it live.
Yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, quite frequently, getting to see it portrayed in a way that it wasn't played for laughs, and that it was portrayed relatively accurately, especially given the headspace of Puss's character in this film, kind of being knocked down a couple of pegs from, the high and mighty hero to realizing, I'm dealing with a very scary situation here, and I'm constantly being both hunted and haunted by death himself.
In the form of a wolf, like you.
In the form of yes, like me. Oh my gosh, not enough can be said about Death the Wolf. He is a fantastic character. And this is also coming from someone who's, of course, a huge fan of wolves, to the point where, my character that represents who I am is one. But yeah, we're going off into the weeds here. That scene in particular it's so visceral, and it's so well shot and well animated that in some ways, I mean, the best kinds of films are the films where you experience the emotions along with the characters and you go through what they're going through. So I hate to say it, but I felt my own felt my own anxiety and my own levels of fear starting to spike when watching that scene. And not only are we feeling really bad for Puss, but it's also like, we're seeing him in a way that humanizes him. And we're seeing him in a way that we probably haven't really seen before in both the past movie as well as in the Shrek franchise in general. So the fact that he's given this moment to be incredibly vulnerable and the moment to realize that he's basically not immortal, no matter what he's not living up to the legend if you really mention, what death said to him in the film, in a couple scenes, in a number of scenes. Yeah, overall, it gives Puss a level of his character that allows the audience to not only feel what he feels, but understand the fact that they can put themselves in his boots, for for lack of a better term here.
Yeah, even the greatest of heroes, they even experience, some kind of anxiety or even PTSD that we might not, even see. So for us to see that in the film, it's not only refreshing, but it is also, as you said, humanizing, and also validates how we feel in certain situations.
Precisely. I mean, once again, if you really consider that, it's such a breath of fresh air, considering the fact that, I mean, even this film is undeniably a comedy. It's still got that, that Shrek kind of flair to it, even with its own individual pizzazz. But at the same token, it's got a lot of heart, and it also has these moments where it just gets so deep and so real and so visceral, and it gets you to really reflect on not only Puss as a character, but yourself and your own position, both as a viewer of the story and just in general. I think overall, it's the whole movie. The whole movie, I can't recommend enough. It's something that you kind of just have to see in order to believe. But yeah, overall, fantastic experience, and it's just it shows you that we ourselves are not weak for everyone, for not quote unquote living up to the legend, because you can't all of the time. Puss can't do it. We're all people, we're all human beings, we all experience things that hurt us and scare us, and that should be something that isn't looked down upon.
It should be as much as part of the legend that Puss really is. He is still a hero to us no matter what.
Precisely. But yeah, overall, I mean, if you really consider, I mean, apart from story-wise and even, apart from that scene and apart from the story itself being so wonderfully structured and really being a strong comment about living your life to the fullest and appreciating who you are, what you have, and who you have. In general, we're kind of, ignoring the elephant in the room here, which is the fact that this is utter eye candy. And like you said, I think it primarily is because of the level of Spider-Verse influence. It was funny. I mean, from what I've heard, being around other animators, the use of those techniques that were developed during that specific era of animation, and even in certain circumstances specifically for that film, using some of those techniques in a Shrek movie kind of seemed, at least at first, a little like there's a little bit of a dissonance between that.
Yeah, especially with when you notice that change in frame rates, it's during the action scenes, especially.
Yeah, I mean, from that, that being said, I feel like that technique is incredibly effective when it comes to not only elevating the story, but also just bumping up the quality of animation that DreamWorks puts out in general. I mean, if you really consider it, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was released in a post Bad Guys DreamWorks. And, not to go off into the weeds and talk about the bad guys too much, but also a phenomenal film. Please go check that out if you haven't already. Then
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm sure that a majority of the people who are tuning into this probably have either seen it or have heard a multitude of people say, "Go watch the bad guys" already. So you're probably not hearing any new news here anyway, but at least in that regard. But that being said, the bad guys in and of itself really amped up DreamWorks's quality of films. I mean, they've pretty much always made movies that were relatively well animated and enjoyable. But this specific era for DreamWorks, I feel, is incredibly promising, specifically in the award sort of category as well, if you're, contextualizing this in the form of the Oscars. But yeah, it's giving, considering the fact that they're drawing influence from other studios and they're learning to use other styles and other methods of animation in a way that's effective and that's effective to their storytelling and to the kind of films they make. It's really giving them a leg up from pretty much from a lot of other studios, namely Disney, who seems currently pretty set in their ways.
Yes. With the bad guys and of course Puss in Boots, which is nominated for an Oscar, how does that compare to Disney's current lineup?
I mean, if you really want to get into, I mean, in general, this whole conversation is a conversation about taste, and it's a conversation about what the Academy likes and thinks is, deserving of an award. But I mean, if you really consider the direction that CG animation in particular is going, specifically with the stuff that Disney is making, they've kind of been pushing realer and realer and realer, or at least,
Like hyper realistic.
yeah, almost hyper realistic movement, hyper realistic texturing and design. And so in some ways, I mean, you can clearly tell these films are animated because the people look like cartoons. But at the same token, there is so much going on in them visually that in some ways it can be easy to forget that you're watching an animated film and that you're watching something that was even made by people, for that matter. Disney, and this is my own opinion, of course, if Disney continues to push realism too far with their work, then this could be they could be entering an era where they're becoming very stagnant, they're not really maintaining their title of powerhouse, which personally I don't see a problem with that. I think it's time to let, other studios have that spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if Disney wants to learn from, not, I wouldn't even necessarily say their mistakes, but if I want to advise them that the direction they're going is not really the direction that the rest of the industry is taking. So in some ways, they've got to either sort of make films that feel unique and fresh, or they're going to enter another dark age.
So bottom line, too long didn't read. Who do you think's going to win?
Oh no, don't ask me that question, because I've been saying it all along. This is such a tight race that I can't really pinpoint who it is. I mean, I feel like historically speaking, with
It's going to
the
be
nature,
Disney.
Yeah, it's gonna be Turning Red. I mean, we didn't really even cover it, and in some ways, I don't feel like we did it a lot of justice because it is, from what I've seen and from what I've heard about Turning Red, it is one of those films that definitely does cover the topic of adolescence and coming of age quite well, especially coming of age of young girls in the early 2000s and just in general.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, even considering its greatest strengths, it's being completely biased here, it's still a Disney film. All things considered, considering the fact that, even considering the fact that the award has constantly gone to Disney these years, I think it's going to be Turning Red, no matter what.
Yeah.
But if I had my way, it would either be Pinocchio or Puss in Boots.
Yeah, Pinocchio's got a little bit more of a momentum going because it's won both the Golden Globe and the BAFTA. So there is that. So I think Puss in Boots, it might as well be the wild card anyway because it has been nominated, but it hasn't really won the award yet.
Yeah, which is strange considering the fact that it's got such a high audience acclaim. I mean, if you look at it on Rotten Tomatoes, I mean, once again, that's also a matter of taste too. But hearing from other animators and other people who enjoy animation and who go to see animated movies and films, that movie has done so well that I'm shocked that it hasn't won anything. But at the same token, like you said, it's the wild card, and there is no guarantee that it won't pull this off, or will, for that matter. Like,
yes.
we can't really tell. Ultimately, I feel like while the award could go to Turning Red, most likely, there is still a lot of promise with the other two nominees that we've spent this past long period of time talking about. So what do you think, Adrian? Who do you think is gonna take home the Oscar?
I mean, if we just look at this award season, I mean, you've already had the Golden Globes, you've already had the BAFTAs, and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. It has already taken home Best Animated Feature Film, or whatever the equivalent is for the Academy Awards. And it's already taken home Best Animated Feature in both of those ceremonies. So I think most likely we might see either Turning Red or Pinocchio take home the honors. But I would be really surprised at this point if Puss in Boots pulls through for a victory.
Well, we're just gonna have to see once the Oscars premieres.
Or gets underway this coming Sunday.
Yeah, it'll. Once again, you'll find out. We'll find out, and whatever wins, we'll have a nice discussion about. And from there, yeah, don't forget to tune in to the Academy Awards on
ABC.
On ABC next Sunday night.
Yes, in Baltimore, that will be on WMAR Channel 2. In Philadelphia, where you currently are, it'll be on WPVI Channel 6. Where I live, it's going to be on WFTV Channel 9. But go ahead and check your local listings anyway, because the start time for the ceremony, it will vary in your local area. So make sure to check that. In just a moment, we're going to be taking a look at Lost Media No More, as the Bluey pilot has already been unearthed. And we're also going to be taking a look at something about all ends with new beginnings, I think. We'll figure it out. Stay tuned. We're back with more of the Sachairi and Peaches show, and about the last segment we did, when I did the press release for this show a couple weeks ago, I did not realize that the Oscars were not going. Well, I didn't realize the Oscars were not going to be on March 5th, but instead on March 12th. So that's kind of why we did that segment, just to kind of rectify that mistake, and also to hype you up for what's to come this coming Sunday. So, Oscars, Sunday, ABC, you'll probably know when to tune in. So anyway, yes. So, time now for something completely different, and, well, being this is our first episode and all, it's kind of only fitting that we dig into a certain pilot that has been, shall we say, dug up from the grave, if you will. And we're talking about, of course, Bluey.
Bluey. Not enough can be said about Bluey. Overall, amazing show, and Bluey is one of those cartoons that is a once in almost like a generation sort of experience. It literally transcends its initial audience and creates such an incredible show that really focuses on the theme of family and love and the importance of play in both child and even adult lives. It's overall just such a fantastic show, and if you haven't checked it out already, please do. But yeah, overall, everything that I've said about the show itself as it is now, to a degree, was kind of null and void in this very brief couple minute animation test / animation pilot.
It was actually a minute long, but it was a pilot nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, overall, this specific pilot, from what I can tell, I mean, overall, if you know anything about Bluey, you probably know that Bandit Healer is probably one of the world's best dads, at the very least, the world's best animated dad. I mean, I think he's even won like Father of the Year awards, for crying out loud, and he's a cartoon character. That's how you should. That's how you know you're you're a fantastic character if you're winning awards, even if you don't exist.
Yes.
I mean, all things considered, the way Bandit is now was definitely not who he was in the pilot. I mean, if you watch the pilot, it's basically just a minute of test animation with Bluey, with Bandit, and with cameos of Rusty
and Mackenzie.
And Mackenzie. But overall, I think the most interesting character to really pick apart this very short little bite of animation that we got from Bluey was the fact that Bandit seems very much, how can I say this? Bandit seemed like he was almost in the same. Bandit seemed kind of like a deadbeat dad, to put it bluntly. He, once again, watching his behavior in this short episode, if you could even call it that, versus watching Bandit now, is like the difference between night and day. It's Bandit was playing on his phone. He wasn't really paying attention to what his daughter was doing. He was constantly pushing her higher and higher on that swing. Yeah, he was like you said, he was playing Fruit Ninja while while he was supposed to be pushing his daughter on the swing set. So that being said, in a lot of ways, I mean, in general, pilots are usually nothing like the final product anyway, but long story short, I'm genuinely happy that the pilot version of Bluey was not the version of Bluey that we got.
Yeah, it could have turned out very differently. And you told me about this during the break, but as it kind of really turned out, it was actually meant to be a piece of animation for adults.
At least initially. I mean, from what I've heard, this could very well be a rumor, but from what I've heard and seen, the initial concept was, like you said, definitely meant to be more of an animated series. Probably more on par with, like, I'm not exactly certain what it would be kind of, comparing it to.
I mean, you got King of the Hill, you got Rick and Morty, you got American Dad.
It probably would have been in the kind of like, Bob's Burgers, maybe even a little bit of like the Simpsons kind of family.
That's
I
true.
mean,
Yeah.
who knows ultimately? But initially the show was meant to be an adult animated comedy of some type, or at the very least an animated comedy meant for an older audience, which is interesting considering the fact that even stylistically it sort of rubs off in the style of the pilot, because in the style of the pilot everything is even squarer looking than it is in the show. Squarer, is that even a word?
No, I don't think so. No.
No, it's not. That's not a word.
Even more square would be the
Yes,
correct way to go about this
yes,
grammatically.
there you go. More square. Everything looks more square. They really hone in on the fact that these characters are square shaped, which is interesting considering square shape language is usually, associated with characters being reliable, and Pilot Bluey and Pilot Bandit seem anything but. But yeah, overall, stylistically, the pilot kind of leans a bit more towards at least an era of a decision that the studio was making. If Bluey ever was initially meant to be for a more mature audience, this was probably kind of their reckoning point. This weird in the middle situation where Ludo animators were probably sitting down looking at this concept, thinking to ourselves, okay, wait a minute. What do we want this show to be? Do we want it to be a grown-up show, or do we want it to be a quote-unquote kids show? And ultimately, I feel like they made the proper decision by making it quote-unquote for kids. As I said, Bluey is one of those shows that really transcends its initial target audience. It's a preschool show at heart, but it's meant to be for everyone. There is not a single person that I can think of that Bluey transcends what it was meant to, what it is. It's meant to be a show for everyone, despite the fact that it's, given the quote unquote TVY rating and being labeled as a preschool show. It's literally meant for everyone. I mean, I'm 22 years old and it's probably my favorite modern animated series, and I got my mom and my grandmother even who are into it. I got my sister who's 2 years younger than I am into it, and I mean, ask around a college campus if people have heard about Bluey, and 9 times out of 10, especially if you're in an animation department, people are going to raise their hands and say, oh, I know Bluey, I love Bluey. So yeah, if anything, Bluey is such a
It's such a great show for both kids and adults. Like even for adults without kids too.
precisely. I mean, it's overall. I mean, you don't really come by animation like that, especially animation that's targeted at preschool aged kids. Ultimately, I feel like I'm just happy that Ludo learned from its weird transitional kind of what do we want this show to be era, and made something really beautiful out of it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad it did, because now we've got like what 3 seasons, season 3 in progress, and who knows, there might be even more Bluey stuff along the way.
So from what I've heard, from Ludo, snooping around their social media and being really active in the Bluey, the grown up Bluey fandom communities, there's no signs that this show is stopping. It's probably going to keep building momentum until they decide that okay, it was a good run. We'll stop it here. But yeah, hopefully there'll be many more seasons to come of Bluey, and that it continues to get better and better with every season.
Yes, and but also this on the other side of the pillow, sometimes it will kind of really stick to a formula, and it might not be good in the more in the long term. And sometimes it might get a little bit stale. So maybe so at the same time, we kind of want it to go on, for much longer, but sometimes it might be better to kind of really just keep it a little short, keep it a little sweet, and just, enjoy what, all the good parts that came out of it.
Precisely. I mean, there's no denying that seasonal rot is something that exists, and even the best of shows can experience it. But you know what? We'll make Ludo decide what they ultimately want to do with their incredible little blue pup. Hopefully she'll, but I mean, even if they were decide to end the show sooner rather than later, I think the cultural influence and the level of emotional impact the character has will transcend time.
Yeah, and I agree. And speaking of being impactful, what about Panic at the Disco? I mean, they're going to be in a couple of days' time. They're going to be doing their very last gig in Manchester, England, in the United Kingdom, and talk about what a long history they've had, going through different lineups, and yet still putting out some great music that they had along the way.
Of course, I mean, I've got kind of a pretty typical run-of-the-mill kind, in some ways, Panic at the Disco experience story. Like, my sister, who I mentioned before, is much more of a music person than I am. I kind of just listen to whatever, like, oh, this sounds good. As long as it inspires me to create art, then it's good music. But yeah, my sister being a big music person, when we were much younger, I think we were probably like 11 and 13 or something like that, or 12 and 10 or something. But she introduced me to their stuff, and I was like, this is so good, I can't get enough of it. And all I would do all I would listen to for the longest time was just Panic at the Disco. My grandmother's car had a CD player in it, and that's all we would. My grandmother would ask, on rides back and forth to school, what do you want to listen to? And like, oh, we want to listen to A Fever You Can't Sweat Out. So we probably had that on over and over and over again. My poor grandmother. But yeah, I mean, that being said, even with it's kind of sobering and kind of strange to know that this thing, this band, this entity that it's been around and been a staple of music in general. It's been such a staple of music history, and specifically of the pop rock indie kind of scene history. And knowing that they're going to be playing their last show is something that in some ways seems a little bit unthinkable, but it also kind of reminds you that all good things must eventually come to an end.
And especially since Brendon is expecting a new child along the way, so it's kind of really a new beginning for him.
Exactly. I mean, I'm incredibly proud, and I'm incredibly happy for him, and it's going to be, the fact that he's becoming a dad is something that just, it fills me with such joy. I mean, knowing, thinking back to who I was when I was like, 12, 13 years old, if I had heard that news back then, I probably would have been 10 times as excited as I am even now. But yeah, the fact that he's deciding to pull a plug on this just because of the fact that he wants to be there for his kid, especially, is something that is incredibly admirable, and I think really speaks to just who Brendon is as not only as an artist, but just as a person in general. I mean, thankfully, it was interesting because I actually had a very brief encounter with Brendon at a 2019 concert back in DC in like January, and that was like my mom's birthday present. She's also a huge Panic fan.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's my sister introduced mom to it, and my mom's like, "This is so good. I'm enjoying this." It's amazing. But yeah, that was her birthday present basically. And my sister, it's funny, all three of us have seen Panic at the Disco live for our birthdays, which is awesome. But this was in celebration of mom's birthday, and he came. This was during the tour where he did something called the Death Walk, which was basically he goes out into the crowd during one of the songs in order to walk to a floating platform that would take him back to the stage during Dying in LA. But he came around and he came to our row and he saw the three of us there and was like, "Hi." And we talked for a couple seconds as he had to leave, obviously. But my sister being at the end of the row ultimately got a hug from him, which is a moment that I don't really think I'll ever forget, knowing that I was able to have a moment, even if it was super brief, just to witness someone who I held such, high acclaim, especially when I was younger, and seeing the kind of person that, he was and is it was incredibly magical. Like I couldn't stop crying after that concert was over, knowing that special, incredible moment happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, cheers to a long, amazing career, and I sincerely wish Brendon the best, both as an artist and as a father.
If you love them, let them go, huh?
No truer words have ever been said.
Mm-hmm. With that being said, that is it for the Sachairi and Peaches show for today and for this week, as a matter of fact. Hope you can stay tuned, because next week we're going to be discussing Sunday night's big winner in Best Animated Feature, and I cannot wait to see who will be winning that award that weekend.
I can't either. I feel like, regardless of who wins, we'll have a lot to say.
All right. Hope you make it a habit of listening to us. I hope you make it a routine of listening to us. So until next Tuesday, as a matter of fact, I'm Adrian Mata.
I'm Emma Settle.
And we'll see you next time. This has been the Sachairi and Peaches Show. Produced, edited, and co-hosted by Adrian Mata and co-hosted with Emma Settles. The Sachairi and Peaches Show is a Zagland original podcast.